ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون. صدق الله مولانا العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our seminar on astronomical calculations as a means of beginning the Ramadan and to celebrate Eids. This is a seminar organized by British Fatwa Council as well as the UK Hilal Forum and Crimea Institute. And we are really delighted that we've got two wonderful and very expert Muslim astronomers, scholars, and from Singapore. I'll be introducing them, Dr. Firdaus Yahya and Brother Faizal bin Othman. So let me just, before we introduce our two wonderful speakers, let me say a few words about what is the purpose of this seminar. Most of you who live in UK will know that since the 70s, we've had very heated debates and tension over how to sight the moon. It's nothing new. It happens all over the Muslim world, even in Muslim countries where you have official governments, people still dispute, and there are groups who would dispute the method and whether it is truly being seen or not. So this is it's a phenomenon that happens everywhere. So it's not a new, but it becomes a very difficult in a non-Muslim country where Muslims are a minority and where our children who go to the school are having Ramadan on separate days, Eids on separate days, workers having to ask their employers to give them a holiday on which day. Is it Monday or is it Tuesday? So this creates problems for the wider society as well. And so it is really important that Muslims do agree on some kind of formula which suits them all and everybody really feels comfortable with it. And now that we live in an age of science, age of technology, and of course now in the age of artificial intelligence, we should really be looking at science, as many ulama, majority of ulama actually accept that. It is a sensible way that we should be using astronomical calculations, because the Quran says, "Ash-shamsu wal-qamaru bi-husban." Allah created the sun and the moon according to a well-planned calculations. They are actually well ordered, and they do not move a second here or there for millennia. Their accuracy is really amazing. How Allah has created them accurately. Our job is now to discern how and when the moon will be visible, and that is the job of our astronomers. And today, inshallah, we want to learn from these astronomers what are the methods that they use. And Singapore is really interesting because it's very similar to UK in the sense that it's a very cloudy, rainy peninsula, just like our island, the UK, which is very cloudy. The possibility of seeing the moon here is really challenging and very difficult, and they have exactly the same. So it's really a lot of good parallels there, which makes it very good model for the UK Muslims as well. So it's for that reason that I asked the Mufti Nazruddin, the Grand Mufti of Singapore, to recommend two of his people to give their thoughts and their understanding about how the Singapore Muslims begin their month of Ramadan and how they begin and celebrate their Eid. So he recommended these two wonderful amazing astronomers and scholars. And of course, our wonderful Hafiz Abdul Latif was, mashallah, the one who organized this through the Mufti's office. So I'm really grateful to him. But let me introduce our first speaker. It's Dr. Firdaus Yahya, who's a scholar of Islam. He studied in Al-Azhar. He has a Hafiz al-Quran. He got his MA, master's degree from International Islamic University in Malaysia on Quran and Hadith. And his master's thesis was the critical analysis of Hadith that concerns present sighting. So he's, mashallah, been interested in moon sighting for a long, long time. So he's been looking at that. His PhD thesis analyzes the creation of the metaphysical and the physical cosmos from the viewpoints of Al-Quran. That would be really interesting to hear more about that from Dr. Firdaus. I'll be very interested to see to understand the creation of the universe and how that links with possibly with evolution as well. Hadith and modern science. His thesis was recommended for publication and subsequently published by the International Islamic University. He studied astronomy, falak al-shar'i, and he's also written a book on the astronomy as well, or Islamic astronomy, introduction to falak Shara'i, and inshallah this is the first Islamic astronomy book published in Singapore, and he's also finishing off his second book on it. So mashallah, we have someone who knows what he's talking about. So over to you, Dr. Firdaus Yahya. We look eagerly forward to listening to you, Jan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Musharraf, for that kind introduction. Very kind of you. Alhamdulillah, and I'm very honored to be invited to share a little bit of knowledge that I had, and so that inshallah for the betterment of the ummah, especially for my brothers and sisters who are living in United Kingdom, who have almost similar climate and atmospheric condition like us in Singapore. So let me just go straight to our presentation, to my presentation tonight. I'll be talking on the Islamic part, the Sharia part of the crescent sighting, which I have to admit, I took it mostly from my master thesis, which I wrote and submitted, which are the critical analysis of the hadith. And I went through all the hadith that had to do with crescent sighting, and also calculations, and then all the commentaries of scholars from the earliest hadith scholars and fiqh scholars right to the modern time. So it spans 1,400 years of scholarly critiques of those hadiths. And I selected some of this, some of those critiques and also some of the comments, and I will share with you tonight, inshallah. Now, the second part will be on the astronomical calculation itself, which is presented by my colleague here, Mr. Faizal Othman, and he will share on the basis of Singapore's, the criteria that Singapore used to determine the start of the Hijri month. Okay, so the Sharia's perspective for moon sighting will be presented by me. Now, we all know that we have to see the crescent. That is almost like, taken for granted. But sometimes we tend to forget, or we overlook that the Sharia is simple. And the Prophet ﷺ give the Sharia through Allah SWT Sharia through the Prophet ﷺ. And actually the Prophet ﷺ gave two options. If you look at it, two options for us to choose and to use. Okay? It's not just one option, but two options when it comes to starting the Hijrah month. And what are two options? Be based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The famous hadith is that go and see the crescent. Okay, if you can't see the crescent, then you complete the month 30 days. Now that hadith actually, okay, there are 26 hadith that concerns active visual sighting. I compiled them, all of them, for all the books of hadith. There are more than, tens, no, more than 20 books of hadith that I took all these hadith from. Some of them were just repetitive, but I will sift it through, and then I call it as 26 authentic and very, what do you call it, as unique hadith that talks on active visual sighting. The crux of this hadith is that you go and see the crescent. If you can't see the crescent, then complete the month 30 days. Now, this hadith, this 26 hadith, actually been narrated by 12 companions. Now, that I mentioned to you before that there is another option given by the Prophet ﷺ, and that option is actually predicted sighting. Okay, I call it predicted sighting because this hadith basically tells us that if you can't see the crescent, faqdurulah. Okay, try to estimate that it's there. Now, there are only about 5 hadith. There are just 5 hadith, 5 unique hadith that talks on this or give this option, and it's only narrated by just 2 companions, Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma and also Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. But the interesting fact is that the narrator of one of these hadith, one of these 2 companions, Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, whose name is Abdullah bin Umar, he narrated actually both hadiths, both types of hadiths, both options. So he narrated a hadith that says that if you can't see the crescent, then complete 30 days. And also narrated the hadith of if you can't see the crescent, then faqdurulah, just estimate that it's there. Now let's look at these 2 hadith. I'm sorry if I will go a little bit fast because, time is quite short. Now in Singapore, it's already, Maghrib time already. Sun is already setting. So they just go forward. We are 8 hours in front. Now, the hadith, one of the hadith, I just take one example of the hadith from Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma. The same hadith narrated by other companions also. Reported by Imam Muslim, an authentic hadith, Sahih hadith, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu narrated from the Prophet ﷺ, who said, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُوهُ فَصُومُوا وَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمُوهُ فَأَفْطِرُوا فَإِنْ أُغْمِيَ عَلَيْكُمْ فَعُدُّوا ثَلَاثِينَ. If all the different versions of this red phrase that you can see in this slide, okay? فَإِنْ أُغْمِيَ عَلَيْكُمْ فَعُدُّوا ثَلَاثِينَ فَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ فَعُدُّوا ثَلَاثِينَ. So there are a lot of versions on that. But basically, it means the same. Begin your fast when you can observe it, the crescent, and end your fast means end of Ramadan when you can observe it, but you should eat cloud over. فَإِنْ أُغْمِيَ عَلَيْكُمْ, should eat cloud over. فَعُدُّوا ثَلَاثِينَ, complete it 30 days. Complete the month 30 days. Now, which month is it? The month of Sha'ban and the month of Ramadan, because these are the 2 months that we have to be concerned about when we talk about fasting. Like, for example, today, right, this is the 29th day of Sha'ban in Singapore, and I believe should be 29th day of Sha'ban in UK and other countries also. So today is the day when we go and observe it, and if we can't observe it according to this hadith, then just complete 30 days. But then the second option that Prophet ﷺ gave through the same narrator, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, and the Prophet ﷺ said, the same, the first part is the same, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الْهِلَالَ فَصُومُوا وَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ فَأَفْطِرُوا. Begin fasting when you see the crescent, and end fasting when you see the crescent. But the last part, that is the second option. فَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ فَقْدُرُوا لَهُ. But should it cloud over you, you can predict its existence. The word فَقْدُرُوا لَهُ, it can be translated as, predicts existence. But of course, the hadith scholars, some of them have this opinion that the meaning of faqdurullah has been explained by the previous hadith. So there is no 2 options, no contradictions for them. So this hadith is the explanation of the previous hadith, faqdurullah. Now the big question is that, okay, if this second hadith is faqdurullah, which is being translated as, or the meaning has been given by the previous hadith, which is فَأَكْمِلُوا عِدَّةَ ثَلَاثِينَ, you complete 30 days. If that is the case, then why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this hadith? Why not just complete the first hadith? That's the big question. Now, why repeat the same message in a different, using a different phrase, using different word that can be misinterpreted by people? If the Prophet ﷺ is very clear that if you can't see the crescent, just complete 30 days, then just beat it there, period, full stop. No need to add some more. But if the Prophet ﷺ gave another hadith the first part of the hadith is the same, the second part is a little bit different, it means that there is, a hidden message that the Prophet ﷺ wants to tell us, wants to convey to us. Because the Prophet ﷺ is given this gift of Jami'ul Kalim. When he said something, it, combines a lot of message. So, and he said, complete 30 days and that's it. We understand. But when he say faqdurula, it means there's something else that you must consider. And so that is why the scholars, they are in disagreement on what do you mean by faqdurula. Is it, being, explained by the previous hadith, or is it mean as what the word faqdurula means literally, which means you taqdir, you predict its existence? And that's where the differences come in. Now, let's look, it's very interesting to look at how the scholars and how the earlier scholars, which the companions themselves, and how the narrator of this hadith, these two hadith, okay, the hadith of active sighting and predicted sighting, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, how did he approach in reconciling these two hadith that seemingly to be different, or is it explanatory, or you need the second hadith explanatory for the first hadith? And how were the tabi'un, the followers of the companions, approach this hadith? Okay, that was my thesis, my master's thesis. So I found out that actually the narrator of these two hadith, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, and I purposely selected this narrator because he narrated these two hadith and he should know how to reconcile these two hadith. If he didn't know, then of course, there will be report that he consulted the Prophet ﷺ, but he didn't. He knew what is happening. So he actually put into practice his understanding of these two seemingly conflicting hadith. So it was narrated, it was reported that Ibn Umar, in the book of Tamhid by Ibn Abdul Barr, and Ibn Barr says here, إِذَا لَمْ يُرَى الْهِلَالِ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ فِي السَّمَاءِ غَيْمٌ لَيْلَةَ الثَّلَاثِينَ مِنْ شَعْبَانَ وَكَانَ صَحْوًا أَفْطَرَ النَّاسُ وَلَمْ يَصُومُوا. I'm reading the Arabic so that because for those who can understand Arabic, you can see the original word, because might be my translation is a bit off, so you can see the original word. وَإِنْ كَانَ فِي السَّمَاءِ غَيْمٌ فِي تِلْكَ اللَّيْلَةِ أَصْبَحَ النَّاسُ صَائِمِينَ وَأَجْزَأَهُمْ مِنْ رَمَضَانَ إِنْ ثَبَتَ بَعْدَ أَنَّ الشَّهْرَ 29. Means what? If the crescent cannot be sighted on the eve of the 30th day of Sha'ban and the sky is clear, this is the opinion of Ibn Umar, and not cloudy, then fasting should not begin because you can't see the crescent. That is following the first hadith. But if the sky is cloudy on that night, people can begin fasting the following day. And it's considered as Ramadan if it appears later that Sha'ban is 29 days. So it means what? For Ibn Umar, he understands these two hadiths means that, the second hadith can be applied, which is the second option. If you can't see the crescent and the crescent is there from your own knowledge, mathematical knowledge, or knowledge of the astronomy, the movement of the moon and the stars and so forth, and the constellation, and you know that the moon must be there over the horizon, but you can't see it, then just start fasting. What stops you from fasting? Because the Prophet ﷺ has given the second option. And this is actually the same opinion being followed and the position followed by the Prophet's wife. Now, how can you blame Prophet's wives? They were the one who got it from or she, actually, Aisha radiallahu anha, she got the knowledge direct from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if this hadith is perplexing, then she should explain it. But no, she understands it clearly, crystal clear, what to do with these two hadith. And these two hadith actually gave two options. And so this is also the opinion of Aisha binti Abi Bakr radiallahu anha, and also her sister Asma binti Abi Bakr radiallahu anhuma. And also this opinion is also the opinion of the great tabi'ins, Jullatul tabi'in, okay, the great tabi'ins. So you see, this is the position that if some people say, no, you cannot follow the hisab, all right, you cannot follow the mathematics, it is bid'ah, the Prophet ﷺ does not allow us to use bid'ah. Are you telling me and telling us that Ibn Umar and Jullatul tabi'in, the great tabi'in, and the Prophet's wife is making bid'ah? Na'udbillah min dhalik. Of course not. How is your understanding compared to their understanding? How's your knowledge compared to their knowledge? They are the closest to the Prophet ﷺ, whereas we are so far from the Prophet ﷺ. Our knowledge is not even a speck of dust in the feet of these great companions. So we must be humble when we compare our knowledge to them. But then, why is there people, are so against using mathematics when, determining the start of the month or determining the position of the crescent? It is because of this famous hadith on mathematical calculation. And this hadith is authentic, narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ said here, Inna ummatun ummiyah, la naktubu wa la nahsub. Ash-shahru, hakada, 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 wa hakada, hakada, hakada. It means that what? It's either 29 or either 30. The Prophet ﷺ said, we are people who are illiterate. We do not write, nor we do calculate. And the money is like this and this and this, or like this, and like this. So sometimes 29, sometimes 30. So the Prophet ﷺ gave a very simple solution to something that is complex. Because, if you want to calculate the position of the crescent, it is a very complex calculation. It is a calculation that's based on three-body problem. Even Newton said that you cannot solve three-body problem. You do not have one formula. The Newton's gravitational formula just based on 2 points only. And that's about it. For three-body problems and more, you have to have iteration. You have to have estimates. So there's a lot of, estimates, iteration. So it runs to hundreds, maybe 1,000 equations. Very, very long. So this is beyond the grasp of those Muslims or those people living during that time. And the Prophet ﷺ in Islam is Dinu Samha. This is very simple. This is very, tolerant religion. Does not bring hardship to people. So if you can't calculate, you don't know how to calculate, then just follow this simple rule. Just look at the crescent in the sky. If you can't see it, then complete 30 days. If you can see it, then complete 29 days. But if you have knowledge, should we remain as ummatul ummiyah and illiterate people forever and ever? Are we condemned to that? We do not know how to read. We do not know how to write. Of course not. And that is why the opinion of Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Shafi'i, lives about 200 years after, about 2 centuries after the Prophet ﷺ. And he said here, in his opinion, Man kana madhhabuhu al-istidlal bin nujum wa manazil al-qamar ثم تبين له من جهة النجوم أن الهلال ليلة ليلة وغم عليه جاز له أن يعتقد الصيام. Those who are of the opinion that the observation from the stars and the movement of the moon is sufficient to predict the existence of the crescent on the horizon, even though the sky is cloudy, it is permissible for them to start fasting. This opinion from Imam Shafi'i. And underline the word istidlala bin nujum wa manazil al-qamar. It means that this knowledge of the movement of the moon with the constellation at the backdrop, the Arabs, they already knew. They had this knowledge already. In fact, Ibn Abdul Barr, in his book, he detailed it very, wrote it very in detail form how you want to predict that, because he said that they know that if the crescent of the moon is in certain position, certain constellation in a certain night, then there is a very, very high likelihood that the month will be deficient. It means that the month will be 29 days. But if not, then the month will be full, 30 days. So this knowledge was already there. It's just that it's not put on numbers, on calculations, on formulas, on equations, but they knew direct from observation. So Imam Shafi'i knew about this knowledge, and so Imam Shafi'i did not deny the existence of this knowledge and the application of this knowledge towards the prediction of the crescent. And then followed by Imam Taqiyuddin as-Subki, who died in 756 AH, a very great Imam of Hadith and also fiqh. And he said here, وَلَا يَعْتَقِدُ أَنَّ الشَّرْعَ أَبْطَلَ الْعَمَلَ بِمَا يَقُولُهُ الْحِسَابُ مُطْلَقًا فَلَمْ يَأْتِ ذَلك. وكيف والحساب معمول به في الفرائض وغيرها وقد ذكر في الحديث الكتابة والحساب وليست الكتابة منهيا عنها فكذلك الحساب. ولا يعتقد الفقيه أن هذه المسألة هي التي قال الفقهاء في كتاب الصيام أن الصحيح عدم العمل بالحساب لأن ذلك فيما إذا دل الحساب على إنكار الرؤية وهذا عكسه. Which is what? Do not think that the Sharia forbids mathematical calculation. How can it be so? When we rely on mathematics for Islamic inheritance, fara'id, and for other purposes. And in addition, the hadith includes writing and calculation, and yet writing is not forbidden. So thus calculation. The scholar should not think that in this particular issue, which has been in discussions in the book of fasting by past scholars, that the right position is to reject calculation. This position, means rejecting calculation, is only for cases when mathematical calculation shows the impossibility of crescent sighting. Then you can reject. Whereas in this case, in this particular case, it is the opposite, which means that the calculation showing the possibility of sighting, if not for the clouds. So you follow the calculations. So Imam Taqiyuddin differentiate between two types of calculations. One type is calculation showing that it's impossible to see the crescent, and so therefore you go and see the crescent, because calculations back then was not that accurate. But if the calculation said you can't see the crescent, okay, so you go and see. And if you still can't see, then complete 30 days. But if calculation says that you can see the crescent, okay, not calculation, sorry, your experience, okay, and group calculations, very rough calculations, says that you can see the crescent, but you can't see because of clouds, not because of the weather is clear, then just begin fasting. And it's the same position as Imam Abu Hanifa, who says that, to see the crescent too, if the sky is clear, then this crescent must be observable by a large number of people. Jam'un ghafir. But if the sky is cloudy, even one person who can see the crescent, we can accept it. Now that person, if you can't see it, then based on Imam Taqiyuddin Subki's opinion is that, if from your knowledge that this crescent is there, just follow your knowledge to begin fasting. Now, points to note here, right? The hadith on crescent sighting are limited to the month of Ramadan and Shawwal. The Prophet ﷺ did not mention the crescent sighting for other months, including Zulhijjah. That's very interesting, right? Only for the starting of fast, Ramadan, and also the end of fast, which is Shawwal. Well, other month is up to you. You can determine whatever way you want, by crescent sighting, by calculation, or just by following the concept of, they call it the taqwimul istilahi. You just calculate 2930, which is being done by people in the past, by Muslims, in fact, when they determine their civil calendar, that is beyond crescent sighting. Because, if you want to do crescent sighting for every month, then you do not have a fixed calendar, because you do not know when it's going to be in the future. If you put in a contract, I will pay you back on the 15th day of Rajab. When is that? Oh, you got to wait until the crescent sighting towards the end of the month before Rajab, okay, which is Jamadul Akhir. But we can't predict whether we can see the crescent or not. So just follow the civil calendar, where everything is predetermined, 29, 30 days, 29 days is alternate, 29, 30 days, and they follow that. Only the month of Ramadan and also the end of Ramadan, that Muslims back then, they use crescent sighting. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ does not impose hardship on us. Now, but there is, however, a hadith that encourage, not command us, encourage us to observe the crescent of Sha'ban. Why? So that we can accurately identify the date for Ramadan crescent sighting. When we're going to see 29 or 30. So we start from Sha'ban. And that's about it, to assist us in crescent sighting for Ramadan. And so we can take it that, if you want to take it, you want to interpret that way, the hadith on Sha'ban actually indicates that we can use crescent sighting criteria, or just using crescent sighting for other months, including Zulhijjah, if you want to, but not compulsory. So from this, we can see that where is the dalil? Where is the evidence that Prophet ﷺ or Sharia enforce us to follow crescent sighting to start or to determine Eidul Adha? There is no evidence, zero evidence in the hadith or in the Quran. There's also zero evidence in the hadith and the Quran that says that we must follow the Saudi's determination of Arafah, so that we can, coincide our Eid with them and our day of Arafah, which is 9th of Zulhijjah, with them. Zero evidence. And so people who enforce this, they are basing on things that are not there. And it's actually bid'ah. When you are basing things on not there, it's actually bid'ah. So it's actually bid'ah for us to say people, you must follow the Saudis' day of Wukuf so that we can know together and fast on the day of Arafah with them. This is bid'ah. There's nothing in the Quran and Hadith that says that. Okay. So bear in mind on that, interesting. And then we go back to the second point, which is on you know, the matla, but I think my part is already ends, and so I'm going to stop here. So I pass it back to the esteemed Dr. Musharraf. Wallahu alam bisawab. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Firdaus Yahya, for that very thoughtful and I think a very good discussion on the Sunnah basis of moon sighting and what is really necessary and what we should be really focusing on. I think you clarified this notion that you know, the calculation is something that is legitimate, shari, and you know, we can use that method, and inshallah we'll what we'll do is if Brother Faisal is here, we will have Brother Faisal, and then we will have questions, or unless if there is any, Atif, is there somebody on the question asking questions, or we'll have it together, I think, at the end, after Faisal has given his talk. So let me just introduce you to our next esteemed guest. This is Faisal bin Othman, and Bismillah. So let me just introduce our wonderful guest to you, Faisal bin Othman, and Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Where is the introduction? I have it here. Subhanallah. Okay, let me just. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, Atif, have you managed to get Brother Faisal there on the screen now?
Yeah, he's ready.
Good. Okay, well, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Brother Faisal Othman, thank you.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
MashaAllah, you prayed your Maghrib now, have you?
Yes, I did.
We haven't prayed our Zohr here in the UK yet, all right?
MashaAllah.
So, mashallah, we're at the opposite poles, effectively. Mashallah. Well, thank you for joining us this late time of the day. And let me just introduce to you our brother Faisal bin Othman. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Rahmatul Lil Alameen Foundation. And this is a non-profit organization which was set up by the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore in 2009, and it has been managing humanitarian contributions, you know, of more than 515 million Singaporean dollars over the last since its inception. You know, it's a humanitarian organization, and really it represents Rahmatul Lil Alamin, of course, referring to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he's the also the Chief Executive Officer of Tasik Jurong Limited, and he is this is an institution of public character which serves people of less fortunate. Some of the programs that he has stewarded through this is the collaboration with the Early Childhood Development Agency and the Beacon of Life, and an ex-inmate program for prisoners, effectively, to rehabilitate them. And so he's also been the Assistant Director of the Office of Advancement in Singapore. He's also a financial advisor and representative for professional investment advisory services. He's also Mosque Executive Chairman of the Asaikirid Masjid Islamic Religious Council of Singapore. And so he's, mashallah, got many hats. And one of the other ones is the Executive Madrasa Strategic Unit as well. So, and also the Scientific Officer for the Singapore Science Center. And I think that's his experience, which is really interesting for us. And the moon sighting is, mashallah, as you can see, got all kinds of amazing interest, and his background is in science and technology, and mashallah, he's as you can see, someone with an amazing array of experience, which really makes him fit to tell us more about how in Singapore they are doing the astronomical calculation, what is their method, and what are their criteria, Jana. So over to you, brother Faisal bin Osman.
Thank you, Dr. Musharraf Hussain, and good morning to all of you. It's evening in Singapore right now. It's just about 7:45 p.m., 7:43 p.m. in Singapore. Um, interestingly, today is quite an interesting date because about 20 minutes ago, about 15 minutes ago, the Mufti of Singapore just made an announcement that the first of Ramadan will be celebrated on Tuesday, 12th of March. He just did the announcement just now over the public media. So I'm not sure when UK will be celebrating the first of Ramadan, but in any date, I hope that you have a very good Ramadan, a lot of rahmah, and inshallah we can observe Ramadan with all the good that we do, and we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept all our good deeds in this month of Ramadan. So let me just give you an introduction about the experience of Singapore in terms of determining the Hijrah calendar. Now, in Singapore, I think I've heard Dr. Musharraf have mentioned that in UK, the atmosphere is a bit cloudy, and so does in Singapore. So it's really quite difficult for us to observe the new moon. It has started very early in 1924, but thus far we fail to see any hilal, positive hilal sightings in Singapore. And the difficulty why we are not able to see the moon or the crescent or the hilal, I'll explain later on in quite a while. But because it was so difficult for us to observe the hilal, in 1974, we shifted the approach by using calculation. And this was done by our second mufti, which was Sheikh Said Isa Smite. And there was a story to this. So let me just tell you a little story. So in 1974, he was on his way to do his Eid prayers. And while he was walking, he saw a Muslim worker sweeping the floor, which tells him that the Muslim worker was working. And that was the Eid al-Adha date. It was supposed to be a public holiday. But he was wondering, why is this person working? And he realized that we could not gazette the public holiday because it was difficult. It was difficult because there was a lot of confusion in determining the Eid al-Adha date. And therefore, the companies were not able to react very fast in giving the public holidays to their employees. So that led to difficulties in the lives of Muslims in Singapore. Not only work, but if you think about it, the mosques also need to prepare. And in Singapore, as we are a minority community, if it is a public holiday, it affects everyone. It is not only the Muslims, because a public holiday is a day where most people do not work. So he thought that it would be much better if the the Hijrah calendar is predetermined by calculations. And so he set out, and I know this because he told me that because he wanted to understand how to calculate, he go up and down of between Singapore and Malaysia just to learn how to calculate. So he remains to be one of the muftis in Singapore who is able to do calculations on the hilal. Now, there are two reasons why in Singapore um, we use and adopt the astronomical calculation. First one is the atmospheric factor, and then the other one is the geographical factor. So we've heard that it's very cloudy in UK, in Nottingham. It's also very cloudy in Singapore. But the only difference is in Nottingham, I think it's quite cold, but in Singapore, it's very hot. It's like about 30 degrees Celsius in Singapore. So I'll go down to the various factors, the atmospheric as well as the geographical factor. Now, Singapore is situated near the equator. In fact, it is so cloudy, um, and the reason why we are not able to see the hilal is because in Singapore, we are actually the record holder, the world record holder for lightning thunderstorm. In Singapore, we receive about 170 days to about 200 days of lightning thunderstorm. Now, lightning thunderstorm means that you get very thick clouds because the only way you get lightning and thunderstorm is because of the thick cloud. So imagine 170 days to 200 days in a year, 365 days. We receive lightning thunderstorm. On fair days, we may get uh, some clouds, but it is it is very unusual to take a photograph in Singapore of the sky in Singapore and get a deep blue sky. We've never gotten that kind of weather in Singapore. So in the picture that you see here, I want you to take a look carefully. And this is a situation where we were trying to observe the new moon, and this is actually uh, taken at one of the southern points in Singapore, very close to Indonesia. This is an island on its own, very small, and it has a lighthouse, which we call the Raffles Lighthouse. Now, at the lighthouse, which is about 7-story high, there's of course no elevators. We had to carry out all our equipment up there. You could see the three gentlemen there. One of them is Deputy Mufti, Ustaz Murad, Dr. Ustaz Murad. And then, of course, the other one is myself. And then there's a mosque officer, Ustaz Haziq, who is one of the individuals who know how to make the calculation. But take a look at where the telescope is aiming. The telescope is aiming near to the sun. Because the new moon, when we want to observe it, is always very near to the sun. So the telescopes will always go towards the sun. Now, in this particular exercise, we use the CCD, which is basically an enhanced camera, which is linked to our laptop so that we can look at the image the of the hilal or the crescent moon. Um, Make a guess whether or not we were able to track or we were able to see the new moon. The answer is actually no, because I cannot even see the disk of the sun very clearly. The sun is there. You can see a sort of image there, but you can also see that it is very cloudy, especially very near to the horizon. So this is one of the challenges that we face in Singapore. Now, the other part is Singapore is a very small country, which is about 724 square kilometers, very small. So unlike big countries, like our neighboring countries in Malaysia or Indonesia, now Malaysia has at least 29 observation sites all over in Malaysia because it is a very big country. Now Indonesia is much bigger. Indonesia has about 99 observation sites if they were to look out for the new moon. So they could exchange information. One could see, but the other one may not be able to see. But in Singapore, very small, it will probably be one spot or at maximum 2 spot, but it will not make a big difference. So if it's a very large country, if you have many places, one space could be cloudy, another place could be clear. But in Singapore, it's so small, that if you say it's cloudy, it's everywhere. Everywhere is cloudy. So because of the very small country, we don't have the luxury of having many observation sites because all of them the weather would probably be the same. The other part of Singapore, one of the bigger challenge is the light pollution in Singapore. So if you take a look at a satellite image of Singapore, you you would be able to see that Singapore is a very bright place because there are lights everywhere. And this hinders us from observing the hilal. Because for us to very clearly see the hilal, the surrounding must be very dark. Then it accentuates the sliver of the hilal. If it is bright, if the hilal is there, it is bright. We may not be able to see it because the two lights are competing. So the ideal place is when we do the observation, uh, one, it is clear from clouds. Second, it is dark. And the point of time when we are looking for the new moon or the hilal is the point of time when the sun set. I'll give you a sort of a schematic drawing of what I'm talking about later on. But those are the few factors: light pollution, environmental factors, and the small area. Plus, Singapore is a very cloudy place. We've of course tried to observe the new moon, and as I said, in our experience thus far, we have not been able to see any of the hilal, although we tried very hard. In one of these examples, we were in Tuas, and according to the calculation, we should be able to see the new moon. However, on that day when we were trying to observe the new moon, there was rain and there was thunderstorm. So the moon could be out there, but we are not able to sight it because it was raining and there was a thunderstorm. So in Singapore, if you want to be an astronomer, you have to be really patient because you have to deal with the weather. Uh, so let me just go into a little bit about the criteria of sighting the new crescent moon. Now the new moon and the moon goes through its phase, and it starts from the new moon where the point of conjunction happens. And conjunction really means that the moon, the sun, and the earth are in a straight line, so you don't see the moon at all. That's considered as the astronomical new moon. So in astronomy, we call the new moon is at the point of conjunction. Then it grows a bit, like the picture that you see below. Now, this is a a thin sliver of the moon, which we call the new moon, and the age of this moon is normally below 24 hours. It's not so easy to see. If it's a dark sky, you could see it, but if it is a bright sky or very cloudy sky, you may not be able to see. So it goes one round. It goes to a waxing crescent, and then it grows bigger, and then you have the first quarter. The first quarter is half of it. This is called the rubo, and it happens. So you look at the moon, and sometimes you see a split. Half bright, half dark, and that happens on the quarter. It happens on the 7th, which is the first quarter, or the 21st of the month. So 7th of Ramadan, you would be able to see this kind of moon, or the 21st of Ramadan, you will be able to see the third quarter moon. Then you have from the new moon, it goes to the first quarter, waxing gibbous, as well as the full moon. Now, the full moon is called the nis. This happens on the 15th day of the month. So if you are familiar with Nisfu Shaban, if you take a look at the moon on Nisfu Shaban, it's the full moon, right? It's a 15 day. And then it goes back shrinking until it becomes a waning crescent, something similar to what you see again, like this, but it is called the old moon before it goes back to the cycle of the new moon. So this whole cycle, the moon phase will take about 29.5 days. So it's either 29 days or 30 days. So that happens to the moon, and from there we calculate our calendar. So if you add the Hijra calendar, 29 days, 30 days in a year, you will have about 354 days or 355 days. And the civil calendar or the solar calendar is 365 days. And the difference would be about 11 days. So 365 minus 354, it's about 11. And with that 11 days, actually, you can more or less predict when the next Ramadan is next year. So this year it's the 12th for Singapore. It is confirmed 12th of March. So next year we can more or less calculate when the next year's Ramadan will fall. So it's 12 minus 11. So next year would be around first. Excuse me for a while. Let me have a drink. So this difference of about uh, 11 days. Actually, if you read, it's actually stated in the Quran, in Suratul Kafi. You know, the ayat which says that they stayed in the cave for 300 years and then some added 9 years. So 300 years and 309 years. Actually, that's actually the solar calendar as well as the lunar calendar. So this is something which is quite interesting for me. Now, for other communities, some so if you look at the Christian community, sometimes you think that they only follow the solar calendar, but let's say, for example, Christmas. Christmas is on the 25th of December, but actually some other celebration like the Easter, uh, they they also use the lunar calendar. Now this happens after the equinox, and equinox, as we know, is on the 21st of March. And after equinox, they will look out for the new moon, the full moon. Now, the first Friday of after the full moon will be the Sunday after the full moon will be the Easter Sunday. So for this year, I think uh, Easter Sunday would be on the 31st of March. So the Christians community will also use the lunar calendar, and various other communities like the Chinese community and the Hindu community, they will also use the lunar calendar. So Muslim community, the difference is the Chinese calendar and the Hindu calendar, they have intercalation. That means they add another month also in every fourth year, so that the calendar stays more or less with the solar calendar. But for Muslims, we are purely lunar calendar. So every year we will be out by 11 days compared to the solar calendar. Now, how do we uh, determine the criteria for the new moon? So this is something which is quite interesting. Now, in all over the world, if you go by calculation, there are some parameters that communities use. Some of them use the altitude of the moon, and some of them use elongation, and then some others would use the moon age. Now, altitude of the moon is the degree, the angle in which the moon is at sunset. So some groups would say it's about 2 degrees, some say about 3 degrees. For Singapore, I will explain later how many degrees it is. Some would use elongation, and elongation is basically the angular distance between the sun and the moon. And some would use the moon's age. And moon's age, as what I have explained earlier, uh, is the age of the moon after conjunction and at the point of the moon setting at the western horizon. So this is the criteria that we use in Singapore. This is the Mabim's criteria. Basically, it tells us about the altitude of the moon, which should be at least 3 degrees, and the elongation, the distance between the moon and the sun. So it should be actually, it should be the center of the sun to the center of the moon, which must be at least 6.4 degrees. Now, this is a new criteria which was adopted by MABIMS in 2021. And MABIMS is the unofficial meetings of the Muslim ministers in Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, as well as Singapore. So regularly they meet to discuss the matters involving these countries, one of which is the astronomical calculation. So in MABIMS, we take it that we can adopt the criteria, but we cannot enforce it because we respect the sovereignty of each country. So even though we adopt this particular criteria, it is up to the countries, each countries, to determine when their Ramadan is, when is their Hari Raya or Aidil Fitri and Aidil Adha. In this particular criteria, we have adopted the 6.4 degrees from the empirical evidence by Ode, and this is due to the 737 observations that people have made around the world, and this is the minimum, at least 6.4 degrees. So out of the 737 observations, they found that the elongation of the hilal of the moon to the sun is about at least 6.4 degrees Celsius. I must say that the observation is based on sighting of the unaided eye as well as the telescope, but it doesn't cover the CCD or the enhanced camera. So when we look at this particular hilal, we always look out at the western horizon. So it's not at the eastern horizon, western horizon, but it must be on the 29th day of the month. So when do we observe the new moon? 29th of Ramadan for Idul Fitri, or 29th of Sha'ban, like today. Today is the 29th. So after 29th of Sha'ban, or for Zulhijjah, it should be 29th of Zulqa'dah. Then we determine the 1st of Zulhijjah, and then later on we determine the 10th of Zulhijjah. So this is how we do it in Singapore. And of course, like just now what Dr. Musharraf has said, there's always a debate about people claiming that they saw the hilal. In Singapore, it's the same as well. Some people will claim that they have seen the new moon, but actually when you check, it was actually the old moon, because you can't say that you see the new moon at the eastern horizon in the morning, like 6 o'clock in the morning. That's basically the old moon. But some people, they don't understand. But we are okay with it. We can make clarifications about it. So this is my last slide. And the summary of why we do the astronomical calculation, as Ustaz Firdaus has clearly discussed, that it aligns with the religious principle, and also because the calculations are very accurate, and this Dr. Musharraf has just mentioned about how the sun and the moon, they go by it is ordained, the movement of the sun as well as the moon, ordained that it is calculated where they are. So we are very confident about the accuracy and also the precision of the moon. So if we have this knowledge, it's really will be helpful. Also because it is useful to make arguments against false sighting, because at many a times when people adopt sighting, sometimes from our calculation, it's quite clear that what they saw is not the new moon. It is something else altogether. And of course, Singapore, we do this because of the weather. It is very cloudy, so it is quite impossible for us to observe the new moon. So I end my presentation here today. Happy to answer any questions. Ustaz Firdaus will also be around to answer any questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Musharraf, and everyone.
Well, thank you very much, Sheikh Faisal Usman. That was a wonderful, very clear presentation of the moon sighting and astronomical calculations in Singapore, you very clearly explained why you had to resort to the calculation because you just can't see it. And I think it's again a very similar, exactly the same position here in UK as well. You also took us through the astronomical calculations criteria, and you mentioned three ways. So you mentioned that the Mabims, is it Mabims?
Mabims, yes, Mabims.
Yeah, Mabims
so
is their criteria is the altitude of 3 degrees, the distance between the moon or the height of it, and the elongation greater than 6.4. What about the age? Do they consider the age of the moon as well?
So in the past, they consider the age of about 8 hours. But that was the old criteria. The old criteria, there were three parameters. One is the age of the moon. Oh, sorry, let me be very clear. There are actually three parameters that they look at, but the new moon can be considered as seen if the elongation is 3 degrees and the altitude is 2 degrees, or the moon is 8 hours old at moonset. So that was the old criteria. So either one of those criteria can be taken as the moon can be seen. So for the
but
new
you
one,
moved very drastically to 6.4. That's
yes,
double the. So, what prompted that, and does that increase the age of the moon as well?
So what prompted is the new empirical evidence that Ode has done, and this is based on the 737 observations that all of them reported that they were able to see the new moon, but the minimum elongation is 6.4 degrees.
Okay.
So no one actually saw the new moon where the elongation was 3 degrees. So that was what prompted us to change the criteria.
So just explain this, Faisal. You have a observatory and people who actually specialize, and they're actually measuring the altitude and the elongation, and of course the conjunction as well.
So those can be calculated. So how we observe is that from our calculation, we'll bring this outside to do the observation. So whether it is 3 degrees or 6.4 degrees, actually the every 29th day of the month, we can make the calculations. And with these calculations, we go to do the observation. So it's because Singapore is not able to see the hilal, we could not make empirical
Yes.
numbers
So
because
you
we
rely on
can't see. Yeah.
So you rely on Malaysian or Indonesian, Brunei astronomy observatories.
So they can when they observe the new moon, they would give us the reports. But for Singapore, because it's difficult, we can't give you the report. Yeah. So it's so this empirical evidence, the 737 observations, none of it came from Singapore because we couldn't see the hilal.
Well, we've just had one question just saying thank you very much. And there is another question, I think. Uh, Please, those of you who want to ask a question, do, Jen, ask it, Jen. And somebody's just asked, Brother Faisal, yeah, so at 6.4 degrees of elongation, what would be the age of the moon be? Did you have any?
Understand. Yeah, understand. So at every point, when at 6.4, it's not as if it's at 6.4, the age of the moon is a certain age. No, it's not. From every point of time, for every 29th, the parameters may be different. So it could be 6.7, and then the age of the moon could be 5 hours. So every 29th, the parameters would be different. It is not as if it's 6.4, it must be 8 hours or 7 hours. No, it's not. the parameters differ every point of time. On the 29th, when we observe the new moon.
Well, you have a very fortunate situation that you, mashallah, have the Grand Mufti of Singapore, who's Mufti Nazruddin, who has the official responsibility of making the announcement. And Alhamdulillah, people accept that. Unfortunately, here in the UK, we don't have a Grand Mufti. And so this is where the real problem happens. So every group or every group of organizations make their own decisions. And that's where the conflict arises. And I think the UK Halal Forum has made a very good attempt of establishing the astronomical calculation as their method of making the announcement. And it's interesting, the Saudis have, the Saudi astronomy has sort of evolved over, I've been observing it for nearly 30 years now. In fact, I have a paper here by the astronomers from Saudi, how they have seen at one stage in 1970s, the Saudis used to just take the birth of the moon. Conjunction was the beginning of Ramadan. Okay,
yeah, conjunction.
And then
right.
I think the later on the astronomers began to say, well, that's not really right, and they began to put in some of these age, then the elongation, and then of course the altitude, and these have varied, throughout the years, and they say the new Saudi criterion, for example, which depends on probability of seeing the crescent rather than the capability. Again, they were saying will reduce the errors. So this was back in 2005 when the Zaki al-Mustafa at King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology, Astronomy and Geophysics Research Institute in Riyadh made this point that. So they've been sort of improving it as well. But I don't know what their do you know what their criteria is? How does it differ from yours or Marbin's?
Yeah, Ustaz Firdaus be but from what I understand, they go by sighting as well.
That's questionable, I think. That's very questionable whether it is sighting. Yes, Dr. Firdaus, are you there? Dr. Firdaus? Atif, is Dr. Firdaus there as well?
Yes, he's there. If
okay.
you on mute.
Okay, Dr. Firdaus, do you have any idea of the how is the Saudi formula different from the one you've just told us here?
What I know from what I gathered from newspapers and articles is that the Saudis, they still go for crescent sighting every 29th day. Okay, but the astronomers there, of course, they have their own criteria. The first one, initially, like what Dr. Musharraf said just now, it was the birth of new moon. As long as there's a new moon, there's conjunction after ghurub, after sunset on the 29th day, then they will say that tomorrow will be the start of the new month. Okay, but then they also depend on crescent sighting. And so when this crescent sighting, it becomes like a free-for-all. Okay, anyone can claim that they can see the crescent, regardless whether calculations can prove otherwise or not. So there have been claims that, extraordinary claims that they could see the crescent, even though sometimes conjunction did not happen. I think back in 1985, something like that, they had this, they claimed that they could see the crescent, and so they declared Eid on that day. But strangely, there was an eclipse on that Eid day. So, well, eclipse is just a conjunction, so it's very clear that they didn't see the crescent, so they saw something else. So then, what is the way out? Then the Mufti just say that, okay, we made an error in declaring the start of Eid, and we make it one day faster, it should be Ramadan. So then, okay, all of you who celebrated Eid in Saudi, you have to, repay your fast for one day, and that's about it. I mean, you lose one day of Ramadan is precious.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. It's like that.
Well, it's been a really wonderful listening to Dr. Firdaus and Brother Faisal. May Allah bless you and your wonderful country. And the Majlis of Ulama of Singapore is an amazing institution, perhaps one of the most great organization, which is a model for rest of us in terms of doing dawah, in educating the next generation. And I've seen the wonderful work that your Mufti is doing through your muse, through the mosques, the way you manage them, the Quran schools, and then of course how you actually are training your future ulama and aima, mashallah. May Allah bless you, and may you have a wonderful Ramadan, and pray for us as well, and all of our participants as well. Jazakallah, everybody. And inshallah, this will be actually on our website for a long time, and we'll be sharing this widely as well. So with the ulama as well, I think most of our participants were ulama. So inshallah, we're hoping, inshallah, that we'll share it widely. And once again, Jazakallah, and our wonderful Hafiz Abdul Latif, Jazakallah for organizing this. Thank you very much, Sheikh. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Musharraf, and thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Musharraf.
Jazakallah khair wa ahsan al-jaza.